You stand in a cloister, 12:15. The bell calls you to judgment. In this corner of medieval history, canon law weighs more than comfort. The air smells of damp wool and tallow. Cold stone bites your heels. You are summoned to the chapter of faults. The prior waits with the list. The community sits on bare benches, eyes down, hands hidden in sleeves. You feel each glance like a touch. The door closes and the scrape echoes. You bow and kneel on the rushes. Your name will be spoken aloud. Your fault will be named. You broke silence after Compline. You passed a note to the lay brother in the kitchen yard. The porter saw. The porter reports. You have no advocate. You speak, or you hold your tongue, and both choices cost. The rod waits on the bench. The rubric is clear. First, you confess. Then you accept penance. If you refuse, they admonish. If you refuse again, they strike. Bread and water follow. Exclusion from the common table follows. The psalms go on without you inquire. Your place stands empty until they allow you back. You will wait outside, head bowed, arms crossed, while the others file past to the refectory. Any brother may step forward and accuse. You may not answer him until the abbot nods. They know your habits. They count your lapses. The candle sputters near the prior's elbow. He reads the charges. You remember the yard, the cold air, the quick movement of your hand. You remember the porter's keys. You remember the sound they made when he walked away. You remember that this is not the first time. Repetition worsens the sentence. The rule says obedience first, stability next, and conversion of life always. You know the words. You said them when you professed. The rod feels heavier than it looks. The chapter does not meet to kill. That is the law. Blood may not fall in a cloister. But pain is lawful. Shame is lawful. Hunger is lawful. Sleep taken on the floor is lawful. A shaved head is lawful. A place alone at a side table is lawful. A barred door is lawful if the abbot orders it, and the offense is grave. You have seen that door. It stands under the dormitory stair. It opens rarely. It closes softly. What is the harshest punishment they can lawfully inflict? Earlier this year, the council in Rome set new standards. Priests preach them in towns. Bishops carry them in books. Visitors now appear without warning and ask hard questions. Accounts must be kept. Records must be written. Superiors answer for excess. Yet you have heard stories. Not every house obeys. Not every witness speaks. The line between zeal and cruelty is narrow when tempers rise. Who watches the watchers when the door is locked? Later that day, they called you to the kale factory. The prior spoke alone. He told you to prepare for public penance. You will lie on the floor, arms out, while the psalms are sung. You will ask pardon of each brother. You will give up your place at table for a week. If you refuse, the rod will fall. If you refuse again, you will fast. If you refuse a third time, the barred door will open. The keys move on a ring outside the chapter. Back to the chamber. The benches are full. The lector stops. The prior lifts his head. Your name leaves his mouth in a flat voice. You rise and step forward. The rushes crackle under your bare feet. The list rustles. A hand reaches for the rod. The abbot looks at you and waits. The bar on the door slides up. Your sentence is next. Do you kneel or plead? You kneel. The prior orders you to speak. Your voice sounds thin in the stone room. You admit the note. You admit the words in it. You ask pardon. The abbot nods once. He sets the penance. You will lie flat for Psalm 50. You will eat bread and water until Sunday. You will stand at the refectory door and bow as the others pass. If you fail, the rod returns. If you resist again, the barred door opens. The scribe records each word. The chant begins. You lower your forehead to the floor. Wool scratches your cheek. Keys jingle outside. The porter waits for orders. The community watches without speech. This is the rule. This is the pattern. Nothing moves unless the abbot gives the sign. You breathe and count the verses. You endure the eyes. The rod stays on the bench. For now, later that week, you finish the fast. You wait at the door for the sign of peace. The abbot grants it. Your place in choir returns. But the list keeps your name. If you stray again, the steps grow heavier. Admonition. Scourging. Exclusion. Confinement. Everyone knows the ladder. Everyone fears the last rung. The last rung has a key. The monk was 30. The rule was older by centuries. He had professed obedience, stability, and conversion of life. The house followed the rule of Saint Benedict. The community met daily in the chapter of faults. There the brothers confessed, accused, and accepted measured penance. The penalties scaled by offense and repetition. First, prostration and fasting. Then exclusion from table and from choir. Then public scourging. For the obstinate, carcer, the monastic lockup, under the abbot's seal. Paper statutes named limits. Human tempers tested them. Canon law set boundaries. No bloodshed in the cloister. No maiming. No death sentences from abbots. Correction aimed at amendment, not ruin. Bishops enforced these lines through visitations. They arrived with clerks, read the accounts, inspected cells, and questioned servants. If a superior abused the rod or the key, the visitor could suspend him. In grave cases, he could remove him and appoint a vicar until Rome judged. Oversight existed. It did not always arrive in time. Back in the house, mechanics ran on habit. The prior handled minor faults. He ordered fasts, extra work, and prostrations. The abbot reserved scourging, long exclusions, and confinement. He kept the cell key with the sacrist or the porter. 2 witnesses watched when a brother entered or left the carcer. The scribe wrote the date and the reason. The community prayed for the offender, but withheld the kiss of peace until penance ended. The forms looked exact. The experience felt rough. 3 months later, a bishop's clerk wrote from the city. He announced a visitation after Pentecost. He asked to see the chapter book, the punishment roll, and the store of rods. He required a list of all who had been confined in the last year, with dates and causes. He also required the state of the cell by the dormitory stair. Light, ventilation, bedding, locks. The clock of reform began to tick. Some brothers welcomed the visit. Some feared it. The prior whispered that outsiders did not understand cloistered life. The cellarer muttered about lost time and counted casks. The porter oiled the hinges of the bar. The scribe sharpened his pen. The abbot met with seniors and planned the answers. Not every ledger told the same story. Foreshadow thinned the air. 2 winters ago, a novice had run. A year ago, an old brother slept a month in the cell for insolence. 3 weeks ago, a lay servant claimed he heard blows after Compline. The house would have to explain each case. The visitor would ask whether fasting became deprivation. He would ask whether scourging became rage. The sealed door waited below the stair. On the eve of Pentecost, the messenger arrived with the seal. The bishop would come at prime. He would sit in chapter and read names aloud. He would open the books. He would ask about the cell. The abbot folded the letter and looked at the prior. A visitation is announced. The records will speak. What will they reveal? At prime, the visitor's letter still lay on the abbot's desk. The house moved through its hours. Work in the garden. Reading in the cloister. Psalms in choir. The chapter of faults met after terce. Brothers stepped forward. They named small breaches first. Late to vigils. Whispering in the dormitory. A jest in the kitchen yard. The prior set light penance. Prostrations. Extra psalms. Bread and water until the next Sunday. The scribe noted each line in the roll. Patterns emerged. Some men stumbled often. A young monk failed silence 3 times in 1 week. He bowed in chapter, then broke the rule that evening. The prior increased the measure. A day outside the common table. A week without voice in choir. He ate at a sideboard, head covered, until the abbot signed him back. The community watched the sequence and learned the scale. The rule aimed at amendment. The penalties followed steps. The lash waited for obstinacy. Another brother stole a knife from the kitchen. He denied it. The porter found it under his mattress. The abbot ordered public confession. Then he ordered scourging. The community stood. The psalms began. The blows fell in count. The scribe wrote the cause, the number, and the witnesses. Afterward, the brother slept on the floor in the dormitory for a week. He ate bread and water. He did not speak in chapter until the abbot allowed. Confession did not end the pain. Drunkenness drew sharper terms. A lay brother returned from the grange with wine on his breath. He laughed at Compline. He stumbled in the stall. The next day, the abbot sent him to work under watch and removed him from the wine cellar. He fasted 3 days and knelt at the refectory door during meals. A second offense brought scourging. A third brought confinement. The porter checked the hinges of the cell by the stair. The key lay on the hook. Violence raised fear. One winter evening, a quarrel in the bakehouse ended with blood from a nose. The abbot intervened at once. He forbade further blows. He imposed fasting and exclusion. He warned that any repeat would send both men to the cell. He reminded them that no blood may be shed in the cloister by design. Correction must not maim. Canon law drew that line. The visitor would ask whether the house kept it. Paper rolls met wooden rods. Sexual sin brought shame and long penance. A monk confessed in chapter that he had met a woman at the outer gate and spoken with her alone. He stood barefoot in the cloister, hair shorn, for 3 days at the hour of dinner. He fasted on bread and water each Friday for a year. He lost his place in choir for a season. He did not receive the kiss of peace. The sacrist took his habit to the workroom and replaced it with a plain one without trim. Shame worked as a public warning. Foreshadow ran through small acts. The prior kept the cell swept. The porter checked the bolts. 2 candles and a straw mattress sat inside. A ledger on the shelf listed names and dates. 2 winters ago, an old monk had slept there for insolence. He returned quiet and thin. Last summer, a novice spent a week for refusal to sing the psalms. He returned tearful and steady. Some never returned unchanged. 3 days before the visitation, the pattern broke. Brother Alain slipped out at dawn through the garden postern. He walked to a tavern on the road. He spoke loudly. A townsman recognized the habit and told the porter's nephew. At none, Alain crept back and tried the gate. The porter refused him entry until the abbot arrived. He entered under guard and sat on the bench in chapter, eyes lowered. The clock of reform kept ticking. This was not his first breach. 6 months earlier, he had left the enclosure for a morning and lied about it. He had paid with scourging and loss of table. A month ago, he had hidden a coin from his family in a cell. He had paid with fasting and public confession. Today, he had broken enclosure again and drunk in town. The prior laid the facts before the abbot. The scribe opened a new page. The ladder neared its last rung. The abbot spoke in a dry voice. He counted the refusals and the repetitions. He ordered Alain to prostrate for Psalm 50. He then ordered confinement for a week under watch, with bread and water and exclusion from choir until the next Sunday after release. 2 seniors would serve as witnesses for entrance and exit. The porter brought the keys and stood at the stair. The sealed door waited below. The community formed a line and filed past Alain without the kiss of peace. The chant for vespers began above. The abbot nodded. The porter raised the bar. The hinges moved. Alain looked once at the floor and stepped toward the cell. The 2 seniors followed. The scribe dipped his pen and wrote the hour. The prior ordered the cell prepared. The key turned. What will the visitor find when he opens the books? Across the river, another house waited for the same visitor. It was a convent of Benedictine nuns. The prioress kept the keys. The sacrist kept the seal. The sisters moved by the bell as the monks did. They kept enclosure and silence. They confessed in chapter. They received penance before their peers. They lived by the same ladder of correction. The convent had its own fears. Infractions began small, whispering with a lay sister after Compline. A hidden trinket from family sewn into a sleeve. A glance through the grill and a longer look than the rule allowed. The prioress ordered prostrations. Extra psalms, bread and water until Sunday. She cropped a proud veil. She moved a talkative sister to the laundry where steam and work tired the mouth. Small penalties taught quick lessons. Graver faults drew the chapter's full weight. One sister sent a note to a canon servant at the gate. Another met a cousin in the parlor without witnesses. A third kept a coin to buy salve without license. The house answered with public shame. Hair cut short. Weeks without table. Months without voice in choir. The penances aimed at amendment, not ruin. The scribe listed each case and the measure. The bars were inside the convent. Later that year, scandal struck. A lay servant swore he saw a sister speak alone with a man at dusk near the outer garden. The porteress denied it. The prioress called an inquiry in chapter. Witnesses stood under oath. 2 sisters wept and said nothing. The visitor's clerk, already in the city, noted the rumor and marked the house for inspection. The convent prepared the books and swept the parlor. The prioress oiled the hinges on the inner doors. Witnesses swore in whispers. Process guided every step. The prioress judged ordinary faults. She gave fasts, exclusions, prostrations, and penance work. She reserved scourging for hardened refusal and only with seniors present. For grave scandal, she informed the bishop. The bishop's court examined servants, tenants, and confessors. In rare extremes, the bishop imposed lifelong penance in strict enclosure. He could post guards at the grill. He could move a sister to another house. Discipline traveled beyond the convent walls. Time moved. Decades after the council in Rome, enclosure hardened for women. Bishops repeated the rule in synods. Papal letters demanded locked grills and watched parlors. Men spoke to nuns only with witnesses. Nuns left only with license and escort. The aim was protection and order. The result, at times, was pressure and fear. Complaints reached the visitor that some houses beat without measure and hid offenders from oversight. Paper statutes met iron keys. A novice, age 16, stumbled. She whispered to a visitor's boy. She confessed in tears. The prioress imposed fasting and loss of choir. The girl obeyed as duty. She returned to her work and sat at the laundry door each dinner hour, eyes down, hands still. The community watched and let her pass without the kiss of peace until the prioress lifted the penance. Correction taught through shame and hunger. The central secret stood behind whitewashed stone near the dormitory stair. Many convents kept purpose-built cells for the unrepentant, as the monasteries did. Some cells held women for weeks, some for seasons, a few for longer. The door shut with witnesses. The ledger took the name. The sister inside kept the hours alone. She ate bread and water through a hatch. She heard the psalms through the wall. She returned thin and silent when the prioress allowed. Long confinement, not death, was the harshest lawful measure. With that, the first question closed. Scourging hurt. Fasting hurt. Public shame hurt. But prolonged confinement with liturgical exclusion marked the law's far edge. No blood. No maiming. No execution from a prioress's hand. Yet new fear rose. Who punished the superiors when zeal crossed into cruelty? The visitor carried that answer with his seal, but he also carried names. Complaints named a prioress for excessive blows, unlawful chains, and silence enforced by threats. Who judged the woman with the keys? The bishop's clerk arrived at the convent gate before prime. He demanded the punishment roll, the inventory of rods, and the key register. He asked to see the cell. He asked to see the bedding. He asked whether the prioress kept a second key or a hidden bar. He asked whether any sister had been confined more than 40 days without his knowledge. The sacrist shook. The porteress stared at the floor. The prioress stood straight. The door to the stair waited. Back to the convent parlor. The sisters assembled in chapter. The visitor would sit and read the complaints. He would ask the youngest sister whether she feared the rod. He would ask the eldest whether the prioress listened. He would look at the cell and smell the straw. He would count the rods and sign the ledger. The scribe lifted his pen. The candles burned low. The bishop stepped inside. Would he depose the prioress? The visitor sat in the chapter house before prime. Sand lay on the floor to dull steps. The abbot stood to his right. The scribe held the roll. Candles burned short and steady. Keys hung at the porter's belt and clicked when he breathed. The room smelled of tallow, straw, and damp wool. No one spoke until the visitor raised his hand. The first case was small. A brother late to vigils 3 times. The visitor kept to the rule. He ordered prostration for Psalm 50 and bread and water until Sunday. The man bowed and lay flat on the rushes. The chant began and ended. The roll took his name and the witnesses. The rods lay counted on the bench. The second case was not small. Brother Alan stood with eyes down. The prior listed breaches, leaving enclosure twice, drinking in town, hiding a coin, previous scourging and exclusion already given. The visitor asked 2 questions and heard short answers. He followed the latter, public scourging in chapter, then a week in the carcer with bread and water, exclusion from choir until the first Sunday after release. 2 seniors to witness entry and exit, the porter to keep the key and show it when asked. The room heard every breath. The visitor nodded. The psalm began. The blows fell in count. The scribe wrote the number. When it ended, Alan shook, then steadied. The abbot signed the order for confinement. 2 seniors stepped forward. The porter touched the keys and waited for the nod. The ledger waited for signatures. A third case named a kitchen theft. The visitor set fasting and a week's loss of table. He placed the brother under watch in the cellarer's workroom. He warned that refusal would bring the rod. The man bowed and accepted. The abbot gave the sign of peace. The room eased, but only a little. The door beneath the stair waited. By tierce, the visitor crossed the river to the convent. He entered the parlor. The prioress stood with the community in chapter. The clerk read the complaints. Excessive blows, muffled chains, confinement beyond 40 days without notice. The visitor asked for the key register and the punishment roll. He asked to see the cell. They walked to the stair. The door opened. Straw lay thin. A hatch hung stiff in its frame. The visitor traced the edge with one finger and said nothing. They returned to the chapter bench. Time pressed on the walls. Witnesses spoke. A lay servant told of cries after Compline. 2 sisters described rods used without seniors present. One named a second bar kept in a chest. The prioress answered in short, careful words. She said zeal. She said fear of scandal. She said memory of past breaches. The visitor held the rule in his hand. He named the limits set by law. He asked whether she would submit to sentence. The candles did not flicker. The verdict came without hurry. The prioress was removed from office for abuse of correction and violation of enclosure law. She would make public penance in chapter. She would sit without voice at the side table for 40 days. A vicar would govern until an election under the bishop's eye. The rods were to be reduced and recorded. The cell was to be repaired with light and bedding fit for health. Any sister confined would be listed and visited each week by 2 seniors. The room exhaled once, then fell still. Back across the river, the abbot stood at the stair with the porter and 2 seniors. Brother Alan walked between them. Iron felt cold at the wrist where the witness touch rested. The key turned. The bar slid. The door opened. A straw mattress lay inside. A stool sat by the wall. A small cross hung on a nail. Alan stepped in without speech. The seniors signed the roll. The porter turned the key and held it up for the visitor to see. The door shut without a word. Evening came. In the convent, the former prioress knelt in chapter while Psalm 129 rose around her. In the monastery, the community filed past the cell in silence after Vespers. The visitor wrote notes in a narrow hand and sealed them with wax. The scribe blotted the roll. The porter hung the key on the hook and stood watch at the stair. The night wrapped the houses in their hours. No new rules were spoken. Only the old ones acted. Pain, yes. Shame, yes. Hunger, yes. No blood. No maiming. No death. The visitor had shown the path back to measure. Whether the houses would walk it was not yet known. From the dark cell, a voice began Psalm 50. Would the houses heal or harden? Morning after the sentences, the houses moved by the bell. The visitor left notes and dates. He set terms and time frames. The abbot and the vicar read them aloud in chapter. The porter hung the keys on the same hook. The scribe tied the roll with cord and put it in the chest. Work resumed. Psalms resumed. Watchfulness grew. Order returned by small steps. A week later, Brother Alan left the cell. He looked thin and quiet. 2 seniors witnessed the door as it opened. The scribe wrote their names and the hour. The abbot kept him from choir until Sunday. Alan bowed to each brother at the refectory door and asked pardon. He ate bread and water and said nothing. On the first Sunday after release, the abbot gave him the kiss of peace. The latter also climbed down. 40 days later, the former prioress finished her penance. She had sat at the side table, silent, each day. She had knelt in chapter while the psalms rose. The vicar announced an election. The bishop presided. The sisters chose a new prioress by open vote. The clerk entered the name and sealed the act. The new prioress received the keys and the rule. She promised to correct without rage and to record each act. Power shifted under watch. The visitors' orders held detail. Rods were to be counted and stored in the sacristy. 2 seniors must stand by for any scourging. Any confinement beyond a week needed his written license. The carcer must have light, clean straw, and a stool. The door must open to inspection when a visitor asked. The porter would show the key on demand. The scribe would keep a separate roll for punishments and another for routine chapter faults. Small measures limited great harm. By Advent, the monastery read new statutes from the chapter general. They repeated the ladder of correction. They banned secret rods. They required health checks for the confined. They set fixed numbers for blows and fixed days for fasting. They forbade any restraint that left bruises or wounds. The abbot signed. The seniors signed. The porter learned the lines by heart. Rules grew sharper than old habit. The convent adopted similar measures. The parlor took a second grill and a fixed bench for visitors. The new prioress placed a stool inside the carcer and a shelf for a psalter. She set a weekly inspection by 2 seniors and the infirmarian. She required the clerk to list every confinement with start and end dates. She wrote to the bishop when a penance ran long. Light entered by license and record. A year later, both houses held visitation again. The bishop asked the same questions. He compared the rolls. He measured time spent in the cell against the orders. He spoke privately to 3 juniors. He asked whether any blow fell without witnesses. He heard none. He asked whether any sister feared to speak. One said yes. He called the prioress and set gentler practice for novices. He wrote the change into the roll. Oversight worked by repetition. Not every house in the region changed so quickly. 2 towns away, a prior ignored limits and hid his axe. Complaints rose. The bishop suspended him. The chapter general removed him. A papal letter confirmed the removal. The house selected a new superior and opened its books. Old habits yielded to new rule when names and dates reached higher courts. Appeals traveled and mattered. Years passed. Many brothers and sisters endured mild penance and returned to peace. Some served long terms in the carcer and came out quiet. Few met the rod more than once. None met blood or maiming by law. The hardest measure remained confinement with fasting and exclusion. The law held that line. The records kept the memory. Later reformers read those pages and wrote stricter safeguards. They reduced rods. They defined cells as places for correction, not revenge. Some communities learned. Some needed more visits. The arc bent toward measured discipline. In the end, the aim stayed the same: order within the walls, prayer at the hours, and amendment of life. The means could bruise the will and weigh on the body. Yet the doors opened again when penance ended. Brothers and sisters stood, asked pardon, and took their places. The bell called them back to work and to psalm. The keys clicked on the ring. The books closed for the day. One house at a time, change held. You step through the cloister at dawn. You feel the cold wall under your palm. You hear the keys move at the porter's belt. You decide whether to speak if a rod falls without witness. Discipline built lives, but watchfulness guarded them. Want a new series in this world: trials, elections, or relic thefts?